Oh, I love the video. This whole deal is sweet.
I know, it's pretty nice.
Are we on right now?
We're on. So
I wanted to kick it off with a gift. I brought you something.
Oh, please. Yeah.
You ready? You ready for this?
Yeah, I'm ready.
I gotta take off my pants to get it.
Yeah. Oh, shit.
So this is the first edition of Shackleton's book called South. First edition.
Holy shit.
The coolest thing about this edition is the fact that this is the fourth edition of the first edition, and they called it the cheap edition because back then they didn't have paperbacks.
Yeah.
So that original book is 3 times the size. It's this big.
Holy shit.
And so the small version is the cheap edition, first edition.
Right.
And I mean, they're
this is amazing.
Hard to find, but that's
it. This is amazing. Yeah. This is for me, really?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah. It's got a map pull out in the back.
This is fucking nuts.
Yeah.
Well, it's incredible because I was, since we had our conversation a few months ago, we were talking about the Shackleton Expedition. We were talking about, I don't know, a whole wide variety of complex leadership things that people have to tackle. But, and it's not but, it's an and. I've seen a lot more people posting about the Shackleton Expedition since you and I had that conversation.
I love it.
I love it too, because I think that the more people that understand what happened, and I'm not even saying just from the Shackleton perspective, but it's a great book if you're looking at how important real leadership is in a complex environment under the worst conditions for extended period and unknown timeframes.
Extended.
Yeah.
Way extended. Right?
Way extended. Years.
2 years.
Given given time travel and any scenario, survival scenario that you've read about, which one would you put yourself in to experience?
Oh, man. It's going to be the Shackleton Expedition. Well, the most significant thing isn't, to me, what happened during the surviving of the expedition. I think it's more significant that every single person who came back, nearly every single person, there was a couple exceptions, served in World War I.
Yeah.
Two of the guys died on the battlefield within 2 months of returning.
Right.
And every single one in some capacity, even the guys who had disabilities, like one of the original kids that was a stowaway, he served, even though he had a bum leg. He was volunteering and helping because they launched on the day the war essentially started, that Britain declared war. And then they returned and it was still going. Mm-hmm. And, Britain lost almost 1 million people. And so they were like, hey, this is our country. We're coming back and we're serving. And so the fact they did that, I don't know, it says a lot about who they were as men in this case. But I don't like suffering in the cold. But the longevity of that experience, it did affect a lot of these guys long term in their lives. It was just really cool.
Yeah, I think.
What about you? I mean, there's got to be. There's some sucky survival circumstances.
Yeah, well, as I kind of look back on all the survival, because there's so many different survival circumstances that we've never read about, obviously.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of choose your adventure, because I'm the same way. The ice and the cold black water. I think about that when and you've obviously been in the ocean is such a powerful object. Mm-hmm. Then when you put the element of cold and then black being unknown on top of those things with rudimentary gear, ice that could calve or split that you're pitching a tent on, especially as they kind of moved off and they're continuing to try to find a launch point. Mm-hmm. And they're camping on each of these little icebergs and things like that. I can't imagine being in that circumstance. I can, obviously, we're sitting here talking about it, so I am imagining it. I'm saying it'd be scary as shit. Like, just to be point blank, that would scare the shit out of me. How are you going to sleep? You're going to be cold and wet all the time. So you're going to be cold and wet, and you're going to be scared out of your fucking mind that you're going to land in that water and be gone. And everything is dependent on not only your gear, but how well your team adapts to their circumstances.
Yeah, it was a leadership challenge for sure, right? I mean, what's cool is Shackleton, in many cases, in many instances, which is reflected by academic institutions using his tactics in leadership. Things like he identified when morale was low, and then he had deliberate tactics to implement change in the behavior, where he had knuckleheads. Like there's always knuckleheads in every institution or group, and he would deliberately take those knuckleheads away and use them to be close to him in order to control that chaos, to not affect the overall morale of everybody else. He also put them on a strict routine, and they hated it. They were doing 3 to 4 hours of work a day. When they had dogs, they were working dogs.
Right.
And so, man, really a genius in many ways on things that we are just now integrating into business from military experiences, and he's way ahead of his time. I mean, this is early 1900s, 1919 is when this took place.
Well, and I think that leaders today have, well, I'll go into that a little later. I think from a survival perspective, just looking at which survival scenario I would inject myself into, which all of them are going to suck. I think there's a book out several years old. I think it was written in like the 1970s, and I think it was called Alone, or I think it was Alone. A guy spent almost 2, and it could have been 2.5 months on a survival raft out in the middle of the ocean.
Yep, I'm familiar with that.
No, Adrift. That's what it's called. Yeah, Adrift.
Yep.
And I can't remember when I read that, but that scenario, to me, it stuck so firmly in my head, where that you're alone. You have no team. It's up to you. You're going to be 70 plus days as you're being in a small raft with limited fishing gear. It would suck. But I think if I'm looking to really challenge every psychological and physical perspective of myself, I think that would be it, because I'm a very social person. So being alone for 2 months on a raft, I think would be one of the most physically and psychologically challenging things that I could do.
Yeah, I think overall in survival, the most difficult circumstances are the ones where people have to look inside themselves to resource their morale.
Right.
And if they don't have the discipline, if they don't have the routine, if they don't have the mindset, they simply will just give up. They don't have the resilience, because you start to degrade when you're not getting chow, when you're not getting proper water and shelter, when you're not comfortable, and that affects your mindset, which affects your decision making. So that show alone is a good example of that, right? Where the competition is they put them out by themselves, and independently they have to self-film, but they have to survive on their own. And you see guys and gals break down because they miss their family, or they justify checking out because they're like, well, my family now is the priority. This stupid show and game that I'm playing, why would I do that? Because the time that I could share with my family is more important.
Right.
And they just convince themselves of that.
Yeah, what do they call that? Rationalizing, right? So they're rationalizing their decision and their decision to quit ultimately. So
they're in a form of denial.
Yeah.
They're in a form of denial.
Yeah, we've seen it. You see it all the way through the different courses that we go to, or the selections that you've gone to. Like, think about how many times we've seen that right next to us, where the person starts to rationalize. It's like, the infantry's not that bad. You know what? Or I got a family.
Maybe I don't need this.
My wife doesn't want me to BSF or whatever.
You think about those things before you're sitting here in a bunk.
Before you're like, we're a week into this. I was watching. I've been watching Naked and Afraid with my girls. Yeah, and I really do like the television series, because one, it's part entertainment, right? It's not Alone is you really can't capture the attention of somebody that's 7 years old for an extended period of time. Now, it can for me. It's interesting for me. But the Naked and Afraid, there's, the different groups, and there's a little bit of drama and a few different things. And the girls, as they get older, I also want them to not care too much about their body image stuff. So they got to see people in scenarios where they're building fires and there's men and women. It's, it's blurred out, obviously. But I think it's super important for the kids to see just survival situations. So, and having women and men, both in these survival situations. I've been thinking about this for the last couple of weeks since we've been watching this. We'll watch like a half hour every other night or whatever. They love it, by the way.
Do they geek out?
Do they geek out? They get way into this to their... I was so proud of my 3-year-old. She was on the playground in Missouri with us, and she was looking at the wood chips on the playground. She's like, "Mommy, we could start a fire with these wood chips."
Really
so
cool.
That's the way she's looking at certain things, not only because of the show, but because we've been doing fire starting lessons with the kids for years. It's one of the
you're
things
developing that into their... a 3-year-old would never look at that unless they were developing that, through their parents.
I'm trying to, and I think it's such a fire to me is one of those things that it's a primitive skill, and it's one of our most primal and differentiating, we'll call it, aspects of being human.
Yeah.
So we take for granted our ability to make fire, and it disconnects us, I think, from a lot of our primitive past, where we can just flip a switch, the fire comes on from the stove, or you don't even use fire. People don't use fire today. They turn on the heat, they use their microwave. They go through years in years of their lives without using fire. And the majority, I would say, of Americans have no ability to even make fire, right? Yeah. The most, I think, primitive and basic skills that differentiate us from animals is our ability to make fire, right? So I also think it's really important to teach kids, especially just for me and my kids, how to make fire, because I think it connects them to their past. It can hold their attention because people think it's dangerous, whereas you and I both know it's fucking not dangerous in the controlled environment. You can teach kids how to, make tinder and kindling and make fire, and what it's like to boil water and why you should boil water. These are so fun to do. We did it last night, and we roasted hot dogs, in the backyard, but we made the fire from scratch. Really I was using the bow drill. My daughter was using the magnesium scraper. And it's not something, I think, where people, it's not something where I think that people are truly going to need this skill. I think given the circumstances as an adult, you might find yourself statistically, it's an anomaly where you would need the skill to survive. So it's not one of those things where I truly think that kids are going to need to be able to start a fire to survive. However, at least they know how to do it, and it's really fun. It's this connecting through the human past through this skill that's so basic that allows you to capture your children's attention span for longer than 15 minutes. And like I was telling you down there, it's like the kids are running around naked in the backyard. They're jumping in the horse trough full of, ice water, and one's making a fire, and, I'm shooting my trad bow, and they're kind of wild the way that I think.
Wild and free.
Yeah, I think the way kids need to be, this is just my 2 cents on perspective as far as raising children, which who the fuck knows if I'm right or wrong. It's just the way I like to do it.
Well, if you follow just the basic principles of what you're talking about, that's more ancestral, more primal at the core of it, you can't go wrong.
No.
There's no it's not like it's going to grossly and negatively affect your kids.
Right.
It's only going to benefit them. So, in Utah, you could have massive temperature swings. You fall in a body of water here in the backcountry with no capability to make fire, whether that's a lighter hurricane matches, whatever it may be. I was actually interested in I've done a lot of corporate venues where we bring these guys and, I took a group once to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, beautiful place, back in the back country of Jackson in that area. And we're doing primitive fire making, fishing, all kinds of different stuff. And you take a person who's in the city and you put them in this kind of environment, they're completely outside of their comfort zone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like just the basic principles and understanding of how, for example, a magnesium rod or flint rod works.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember I walked at one of the guys and he was standing completely up. And so he had a pile of wood on the ground between his legs. And he was scraping the magnesium rod over like 5 feet, almost like feet above
right
where the sticks were. And he was scraping it down on it. And he's like, why is this not starting a fire? I'm like, interesting.
It's so interesting.
I mean, people often forget this. We're parallel primates. We're not evolved from monkey primates. There's monkeys and then there's us.
Right.
So we're parallel primates. We've evolved out of that status. You won't find many, there are primitive skill sets that you see monkeys do, which are advanced. I mean, they're cracking shells, whether that's, seashells, they're cracking it open to get the contents, but they're not making fire and they're not cooking their meat. And that preservation, that evolution that took place, there's a reason why you stare at fire and it's magical. We call it Ranger TV.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I could stare at fire for hours and I just go to a really wonderful place that's very primitive. It's like hygiene for the mind. I love it, man.
Well, that was one of the genesis or the genesis to this idea, which was, why is fire so special and consuming? When I'm the same way. When I go out and I camp, you can stare at the fire. It becomes this point of reference for a person that almost puts you into a Zen-like state, especially if you're alone. If you're alone and you're around or socially around a fire, what happens is you're looking into the fire or you're looking over to the other person, you're talking and you're going back and forth between the fire and the other person, right?
Not your phone and the other person.
Yeah, you're not looking at your phone. Well, most of the time you're out of cell coverage, but it's the same. Like my kids they'll shift their attention from whatever they're doing to watching the fire. So the coals almost consume a breath, right? So they're glowing and coming down and their parts are getting black and some are getting, lighter. It's so fucking interesting. And I think about it in the context of, we had hundreds of thousands of years of development, and we'll call it the human experience of development. And we're in the last several hundred here that we've got electronic devices and things like that. And actually, you can't even say we're in the last few decades where we've got this, where there's been electricity, screens and things like that. We're in the last couple decades of this, but we had at least a few thousand years of looking into fire that's ultimately, I think, defined the human experience and the evolutionary circumstance around fire, just in general, and how that has shaped human beings is so fucking relevant. And it's so important to who we are that having this connection to it becomes, for me, at least that was like my point, I guess, in teaching this. Is like, we're so connected to fire. If you're disconnected from it, that you lose a portion of your humanity to a certain degree, or what makes you human. And if you become too disconnected, if you're trying to jump over the evolutionary circumstance too fast, meaning we turn the heat on, we use the microwave to cook our food, you go to the grocery store, you have your fucking groceries delivered or whatever it might be, you're disconnecting from, I think, our primitive and ultimately our evolutionary circumstance too quickly. And I think that causes some behavioral or psychological issues. I really do. I think it expedites certain elements to it, because if you're always in an artificial environment, so 70 degrees inside your house, 70 degrees inside your car, you never feel the cold, you never feel the rain, you never feel what fire is. You're disconnected too rapidly. And what does that do to the human body or the human mind if you're not feeding it what ultimately it's been what's been evolving for thousands of years? We don't know what we actually need. We actually might need to walk around barefoot in the dirt. We actually might need that just as much as we need vitamin D. Fuck, nobody can convince me otherwise, because from my perspective, my kids are way fucking happier when they're running around with their shoes off. I don't know. I could be wrong. Like, it could be totally hyperbole or something from me, but I love this connection and the bushcraft, like the skills of bushcraft. I think they create such a unique learning environment for kids, especially, that not only adults, I should say. I'm more consumed all the time with just like how those little brains are developing. Like, I love seeing them like grab on to something and be really excited about it, outside of like, sugar cereal or something like TV or cartoon, iPad. Right? Or an iPad. You guys are doing, which is something I didn't know, you guys are doing like primitive skills for kids.
Yeah. We have a couple, I hate calling them influencers because that's not the right word.
Right.
We have employees that work for us. One of them is, her name's Amber, and it's ms.amber.l, E-L-L-E, miss.amber.l. And Amber has started with us this whole process of teaching children through her experiences, because she homeschools her kids. She's got 3 kids. She's married.
Yeah.
She's phenomenal at being an educator. She's a former nurse. She used to be a nurse. So she has the aptitude to educate, and she does that routinely through her own behavior and routines with her children. And, Kevin Estella, who just left his 15-year teaching job.
Awesome guy.
We're doing a workshop tonight, and we have kids coming out to that workshop. It has to do with cooking this time, because we like educating people on, again, primitive processes like cooking food, starting fires. So we have in Heber City the advantage now of, we just got 8,200 square foot across the road. We also have a land use agreement with Cafaro down the road near Spanish Fork. So we have 2,500 acres.
Cool. Our
overland experience, our bushcraft courses, our workshops, we're doing them all this year.
Right.
It's, to me, the key is Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, and Eagle Scouts used to be a very impactful thing on American culture and the youth of our country, because of all the trials and tribulations they've been going through because of, negligent human beings who are really bad people. There's a void. And that void is parents don't know how to start preparing themselves, their children, or even bridging the gap, like outside of technology. Like, here's an iPad, here's a TV. It's like, dude, there's a whole world that you can enjoy spending quality time with your family that requires you put the phone down. And it's again, like you said, it's a very visceral and very tangible and impactful experience. And we need resources. And one of the things I'm doing, I actually have a phone call today with an LMS, a learning management system. Me and you got higher education online because we're too busy killing bad guys downrange. I got a bachelor's degree online that took me 15 years to get. They're a horrible LMS, by the way. Blackboard, horrible.
Yeah.
I took Sergeant Major's Academy.
On Blackboard.
Online on Blackboard.
Yeah.
I took a 10-hour block of instruction on military museums in the Sergeant Major Academy. It was painful.
So good.
So we're transitioning to a lot of our education to a progressive scale of learning where you go on and you go, hey, I got 15% of being prepared here. I want to learn more. Family, instead of gathering around the television and watching some bullshit, let's sit around the computer or the iPad or the phone and take courses on bushcraft.
Right.
I send you a bow drill, all the tools that you need, and you take a course with Kevin Estella on how to do a primitive fire with a bow drill. We're trying to navigate the hybrid blend of the immersion right now of technology in people's lives, as well as giving them some tangible experience that seems more meaningful because it feels more meaningful, and it is more meaningful. because I hate the immersion of technology without these left and right limits and these backstops. If we just continue on this path, you know as well as I, it's going to, at some point, it's going to be a catastrophe, a man-made disaster that we can't recover from. Who knows what the hell that would be? AI,
right?
Whatever it is, it's not leading to a lot of healthy things in our lives today. And that's the problem.
Yeah, I don't, but so there's a lot to unpack there. The health of the country today, when you look at it, when you look at the overall psychological assessment of the country, where do you rate that as far as
poor?
Yeah,
very. And it's like an addict, right? An addict who, when you ask them, hey, like you have a problem here, and you're trying to intervene. Mm-hmm. They don't see the problem.
Right.
So nobody sees it, right? Because they justify their behavior, whether it's through their cell phone or through the TV or whatever it is. There's a whole bunch of benefits behind this technology. But when there's no limitations on it, because of the dopamine process of us falling intimately in love with those hits,
right,
then we continue to do it because, the only people who are winning are the platforms that are capitalizing on our attention. Mm-hmm. I don't like that because I don't like TikTok's a great example, right? People go on TikTok and you'll go into a TikTok portal. You come out of it like an hour and a half later. You're like, where the hell was I? Or where you were was exactly where the psychologists and the behavioral, people who are looking at how to capture and hold your attention. That's exactly where you need to be because it means more monetization for ads or whatever revenue, process they have for generating their profits. So if we don't take a step back and realize the detriment, where, I have buddies who have children and I've been around their children and I've literally seen them stare into their phones for 8 hours.
Yeah.
With by the way, no recourse from their parents who are friends of mine, where I'm like, hey, bro, that doesn't bother you? Like, it's bothering me and I'm Uncle Mike. Why is it not bothering? It's like, oh yeah, but it's not a big, it's the biggest deal.
It's the biggest deal.
It's the biggest deal. And that balance of kids running wild and free, that's what you have to strike the balance. It's setting limitations. Like the same thing we do when we're, that dude's calling back from Idaho about the land. Oh,
look at that.
We'll hit that later. I mean, that dude's calling back from Iowa.
Move to Iowa.
So much land.
So much land in Iowa. That's the God's country out there, you
so
guys.
So much land. Hey, I want to run something by you because this is I'm always learning about preparedness because it's my field, and you educate me a lot of stuff in business and stuff, and this is something that I recently learned about resilience. So you know how a lot of us in the military, we talk about mindset's a great example, right? Mindset is a very broad topic. So a lot of people hustle mindset as a business, whatever it may be, because it's everything, right? But we don't have an understanding neurologically of what that means.
Right.
So I was talking to a few neuroscientists, buddies of mine, and there's something, there's a book called The Unthinkable, and I'll give you the author's name a little later. I'll look it up. But The Unthinkable, it talks about survival stories. It's like Lawrence Gonzalez's Deep Survival, right?
Right.
Giving examples of why people live and why people die. I used to use this example of the Virginia Tech shooting, and I would use it as an example of developing a warrior mindset. And the example I used to use was in Virginia Tech, when this active shooter went into the school, he killed 32 students, including himself. And he went into the school, he locked the doors with chains behind him, and he went classroom to classroom executing young men and women.
Yeah.
Horrible, tragic event. But what I noticed in the statistics of that active shooting, because I'm looking at the data, is that many of them were shot in the head, close, point blank range.
Right.
Meaning he was executing them.
Yep.
And they were hiding. The protocol one for the government is run, hide, fight, which is a bad protocol to begin with. But they were hiding under their desk.
Right.
And as he was going, he would start in a classroom. And there's one recorded case that The Unthinkable talks about, where he goes into this classroom and this one young man hides. and he pretends like he's wounded or dead. And then the guy goes person to person, killing everybody in the classroom, exits the classroom, and some of them are injured, and he comes back and he finishes them off. And I thought to myself in this engagement of talking about mindset, I said, you have to have a warrior mindset because right? You got to be a warrior.
Right.
Because if you're the 10th person in the classroom and he starts killing one person one by one, why didn't the 6th through the 10th stand up and fight?
Right.
There had to be an athlete in there. There had to be somebody who was raised to be a warrior. And I used to use this as an example until I realized the science behind it. And my example is completely unfounded. And what I was saying was talking out of my ass, which I often do, but I try to back it up with facts.
What do they say? Often wrong, never in doubt. That's what I am.
Yes, 100%. Right. So I'm always saying things until I prove otherwise.
Right.
And what I discovered is there's this part of this process that's has to do with your vagus nerve, right? Your vagus nerve. And again, if you're a neuroscientist, realize I'm an idiot and I have no idea what the hell I'm talking about most often. But I talk to intelligent people, more intelligent than me, about all this science. So if I'm getting the nomenclature wrong, I apologize. So the vagus nerve, it runs from your brainstem into your guts, right? Mm-hmm. And it's this nervous system in us that's measured in what's called vagal tone. It has to do with our heart rate, with our breathing rate.
Right.
Those two things can measure your vagal tone, which could be a determination of your stress levels or your ability to manage kind of stress, right? So you could immediately, depending on the circumstance, measure somebody's vagal tone and go, hey, this dude's high stress, like he's completely stressed out neurologically. So you have fight or flight. We know about that, right? Cortisol, norepinephrine, which is adrenaline. And it's hijacking all your executive function to allow you to fight, flight, or flee.
Right.
Fight, flight, or freeze. So I always thought that when you froze, that the tactic was you're freezing because you want to survive and you are in an elevated state called fight or flight or freeze. Mm-hmm. But there's another component, which that's an elevated state, right? And you know what that feels like. It's the feeling that you get when you're about to hit a deer and you swerve to avoid hitting the deer and you get a surge of adrenaline.
Yep.
So when you have that feeling, that's one zone that's measured in fight, flight, or freeze. But there's something that happens on the back end of that, which has to do with the dorsal portion of your vagus nerve, which is diaphragm down, which what it does is it is a faint collapse or paralysis state of survival. The greatest example of this is a gazelle is trying to outpace a cheetah or a lion, and it knows its ass is literally going to be eaten out. It has no chance of surviving. It's juking left and right, and it's being overcome. It's in an adrenaline state. It's running, and it realizes it's going to die. Its last-ditch effort is to go in this state of collapse, the state of fainting, this state of paralysis. Because in the animal kingdom, also in our primal world, an advantage would be if you pretended to be dead or weak or broken or hurt or injured or sick, then the predator potentially would bypass you because it thinks that you are filled with or ridden with disease.
Right.
So it won't touch you. And there's actually cases in the animal kingdom where this takes place. But it exists in us. So when you have somebody who's adrenaline pumped and they know they're trying to survive, when they know they can survive because a guy is going classroom to classroom killing everybody, or because you're being herded into a concentration camp and you're standing in line for the furnace, or you're in a line about to be beheaded by ISIS, then you notice that the faces of those, which is, and I give you those examples because there's historical references for their behavior, they're in a state of paralysis.
Right.
They're in a state of a parasympathetic state, not a sympathetic state of elevation, which by the way, is a mobilization tactic for your body to move, to survive. You're the complete opposite. You're immobilized. And not only that, but you're also neurologically, physiologically surged with opiates to disassociate from the trauma you're about to experience, even making the process of living to dying easier. So when I talk about those human beings that are in that state, they don't have an option.
Right.
They've already checked out. And actually, the example that this author, and her first name's Amanda, I can't remember her last name, in The Unthinkable, the example that she used was this young man who hid because he was pretending to be dead. By the way, he was the only one who survived. And at some point, he actually thought he had already been shot, but he couldn't feel any pain because his legs were numb when he began to move because all of the chemicals, the opiates that were dumped in his system. Insanity that we don't talk about that. Because when I think about the band of resilience, it's a band. It separates the segments of sympathetic, fight or flight or freeze, and the state of paralysis and quitting on yourself. So then I look at a band of resilience and it's like, how can I avoid putting myself in a neurological, physical state of paralysis because I think I have no other options? So that band of resilience, my objective, whether it's writing a book, whether it's talking and training and looking at different ways of building that, is to figure out how we make it so people don't transition into that too early and give up before they even had a chance to fight.
Right.
Super interesting.
No, it is really interesting because I can remember distinct places in my life where you've seen it. Right?
Combat.
Yeah, exactly.
People in the fetal who are trained operators
that are
and you're like, why are you there?
Or why are you froze? Like I would see this one where it was just like dudes just lock up. And you could see it either, I remember distinctly, like I remember seeing it on a rooftop going, what? Okay, time to get back to work. So like, let's go, buddy. And that's when you go hands on, right? You remember that?
Yeah.
Maybe like, especially with Indige, you're like, let's go. Come on. It's time to wake up. Let's go. You're going to go over here. I'm going to put you over here. And you should point that right off to your left. This is your sector of fire. But you remember this. Like, remember that. And I remember distinctly thinking this, is that senior NCOs would talk about this a lot where they would say, this is your sector of fire. You're from here to here. You're from here to here. You're from here to here. It was always with like a hand and communication, right? And it was like, wake the fuck up. This is your sector of fire. I can't give you too much because the other thing is if you have too much coming at you, I can only give you a little piece of this because if you have too much, is that going to overstimulate you? But only for right now, right, rifleman number one, I need you only to concentrate on this sector of fire. And the only thing I need you to do is shoot back.
Yeah.
And I'm going to train you how to do this. So you're at least trained and coherently capable of we'll call it react to contact in a way that's like what happens if you get shot at. You're going to do this, and this. And we're going to keep it simple because I can't give you too much. But as a senior NCO, as you start to increase your awareness, you start to increase your training, you start to increase your experiences, then you can handle more. And I've looked at that so many times as far as like the how complex the battlefield became. And you think about your first engagement. Like I remember my hands went numb for sure. I remember that fucking plain as day.
Yeah. Like
my hands went numb because I was like, what the and I was talking and I was coherent, but my hands went numb. And I remember after going, this is weird.
Yeah.
Why are my fucking hands numb? Oh, because I had such a fucking dump of adrenaline that I've never had in my life before that point. I'm just surprised that that's the only thing that happened that my fucking hands went numb, right?
Yeah. I had auditory exclusion, my first one.
Right.
First gunfight, I'm on a 50 cal shooting at a point of origin because we just got 107 millimeter rockets.
Right.
My butthole was inside out. And I'm thinking I'm going to die. And then afterwards, I was like, I still have my hearing and I never had a hearing pro on.
No.
And it's bizarre.
It's bizarre.
But then we condition ourselves, right? So as it goes on, you're like, and you're like, oh my God, I'm deaf.
And you get used to it.
Yeah.
And then you're solving more complex problems and you get kind of inundated with these experiences. And now you can actually see the battlefield more coherently. And I used to think about that all the time because you would see guys in the shoot house. That's where you'd see it. You'd see it first in the shoot house, and you could identify the guys that were going to lock up, right? Like vapor lock. Because if you're vapor locking in the shoot house, there's fucking no doubt you're going to vapor lock on target. There's fucking zero doubt.
Yeah.
If you're going to do it here against simunitions, you're going to do it downrange.
Task saturated. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would see it on the catwalk all the time. Whether it was Cephalic or whether it was the course that we went
Contracting
through.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would see it with guys that were really experienced operators where they would sit in a fucking hallway and they would just not know what to do. And it's not that they didn't know what to do. They weren't doing anything because they felt that that was the right decision to make at that point. And you'd come down and you'd be like, what? Why weren't you doing anything? You're like, what do you mean I was doing something? And they'd get in an argument like a tit for tat. And that's why we started videoing guys. Because you'd have to show them, dude, you made entry. When you made entry, you stood in the doorway and you didn't collapse your sector of fire. And they would argue with you and they'd be like, fuck you. There's no way I didn't make entry and collapse my sector of fire. It's like, you did. That's exactly what you did. I'm standing right over you. I'm telling you, that's exactly what you did. My only job is to
look at you doing that and not doing that.
That's why we started videoing guys, because they would argue with you. And I realized too, and it was really in the shoot house that taught me a lot of this, was you would have guys in gunfights, and that's why there's so many different perspectives from gunfights as well, because you would have guys that were in the same gunfight or the same target doing basically a parallel mission that you are, and you would have very different stories from what would happen. Because I'd heard stories from things that I was involved in. I was like, what? That wasn't that bad. What are you fucking talking about? Like, are you crazy? Like,
that's crazy too,
that's
right?
Crazy.
Like on the same line.
Yeah, on the same vehicles, in the same fucking, convoy. And you're like, what? What are you talking about? That's not, but that's what you took from that? Like, yeah, that's what I took from that. You're like, but I didn't take that at all. And then you would be on a different scenario and a different target. And you're like, man, that was fucking intense. And somebody else would be like, what? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
It wasn't fucking intense.
That was nothing.
That was nothing.
Yeah.
You're like, but the more of those, the more experiences you could kind of fold into your experience bag, right? So it's like that wise operator. It's not just the guy that's been to and to kind of convert it back into the civilian space. It's putting yourself into training scenarios for preparedness. I think it does allow you to move through what you're classifying. What was the vagus response?
Vagus nerve.
Vagus nerve.
Yeah.
I think what it allows you to do is it allows you to coherently intellectualize and react what's happening. Because, and we talked about it all the time in we'll call it the consciously competent, because you have the phases of competency, right? I think you and I've talked about the phases of competency where you have you're unconsciously incompetent of something you don't know anything about, right? You don't know anything about it and you're blatantly incompetent at it. And then you become consciously competent consciously incompetent. So then you're thinking about it, but you're still fucking it up. And I always talk about it.
Yeah.
So it's like driving, right? It's like driving a manual transmission. When you've never driven before, you're, unconsciously incompetent. You've never tried it. There's no way that you can be coherently competent. Then you move into consciously incompetent. So you're thinking about it, but you're grinding gears, but you can't take on any advanced scenarios. There's just no way, because the only thing you're concentrated on is timing with clutch and your, gear shifting, right? So you get too much going on. So you're consciously incompetent. Then you slide into consciously competent. So you're thinking about it, but you're getting it right. And eventually you slide into unconsciously competent. So then you've slid that skill over into more of your subconscious. And that means you can drive down the road at 80 miles an hour, drinking a Coke and, jacking off, right?
On the gram.
Yeah, on the gram. But when you think about it in preparedness, most people they're unconscious incompetent. So you're asking people that have never driven a car to get behind the wheel at 80 miles an hour on hairpin turns. You're asking basically an untrained driver to get into a fucking rally car in the winter. That's what you're asking, and to survive, which is an unreasonable request of most logical people. It's not possible. So an active shooter scenario, I guess, is one thing I'm applying that is, if you've never been in a high stress scenario with the expectation to survive and fight back or be able to react appropriately, what you're asking of people is to dump an untrained driver into a professional rally course in the wintertime instantly.
Mm-hmm.
And you're asking them to react appropriately and not only survive, but thrive, which is an inappropriate ask, I think, of most people. But I think most people want to pretend that the boogeyman doesn't exist, right? Because they live in this really comfortable bubble where nothing bad is ever going to happen. You know, Uncle Joe, he's going to take care of all of us, right? We're going to build a structure of social justice warriors that are going to respond to every scenario in the United States, and everybody's going to get equal pay and all those great things in the United States that I think that we're probably on par at least thinking about. Yeah. But most people want to pull the covers over their heads and pretend that the boogeyman doesn't exist. It's like, no, you can either choose to be a victim, because I think that's what people are doing. If they understand that violence does happen, and not only violence, but emergency situations could be like changing a fucking tire or lighting a fire when it's cold. Just knowing that those things can happen, and then identifying that, and then going out and doing something about it, so you're not a victim, so you don't become a statistic. Like, don't become a statistic. And from my perspective, I think that's just kind of part of being an adult, I guess, is like identifying the fact that bad things can happen, do your best to mitigate against those, and then ultimately try not to be a statistic.
How are we looking up there, Sergeant Best? On target, on time, boys! Fire for a flip! Here we go! Set! You heard him! Fire for a flip!
I don't know. I could be wrong.
No, you're right. I mean, I hate, like, even the idea of carrying a pistol, right? There's so many people in the United States that are uncomfortable with the idea of carrying a pistol. And I get it, because I think I remember the first time as a young man in the infantry, wanting to carry and getting of age to be able to carry. I was like, oh, am I going to put a round in this chamber? Is that a thing?
Yeah.
But when you start evolving and learning, whether it's gun handling, safety, whatever that is, getting more comfortable with a pistol, then you have to just ask yourself a very simple question. And mostly it applies specifically to women. If you're a 120-pound woman and you have to protect your children against a 200-pound maniac,
right,
who's hell-bent on raping and murdering you. And I hate to even say that out loud, but that's the reality of things that happen in our country, in most countries across the world. Then what is your defense tactic in order to address that threat? And if the solution to equalize that scenario is a pistol with 900 to 1,100 feet per second, and you had to ask yourself the question, could you live with yourself knowing that you could have done something about it, but you didn't? Man, I mean, that's a very easy thing to answer. And then what I tell people is, get your fucking head right.
Right.
Because the reality is, if you've just figured that out, navigated that in a rehearsal in your brain, then you figured it out, the solution. Get your head right and get your shit together and start formulating a plan. Go to the gun store, pay attention to credible trainers, the Kyle Lambs of the world, and let's focus on getting better prepared. And then that way, you'll never have to worry about asking yourself that question, and you'll never be a victim. You'll be the good highlight in the story versus being the statistic, which is just a whole bunch of numbers of a whole bunch of really good people who've been killed by a whole bunch of shitty people.
You're exactly right. And I think that if more people would do that, they would take the proper steps to not only to educate themselves on proper firearms handling, and then I would say scenario-based training, right? So it's not only how to carry, but it's also how to utilize the weapon in the scenario, because you have to take the next step. you can't end your search for competency with just getting a ticket to ride, so to speak, a permit to carry. You have to continue the evolution or the search for additional knowledge because of what you just talked about with the person's ability to freeze. You have to work your way through that. And the only way I've ever seen a person be able to work their way through that is through scenario-based training. That's the only way I've ever seen it work.
That's it.
I've never been able to see even what we'll call it military guys that have been through a ton of non-scenario based training, which a lot of the infantry units before 9/11, that's basically what they're doing. They're going out and shooting targets at longer distances, doing some blank fire drills and things like that. But they really weren't in hardcore scenario based training. They still had a higher statistic, I believe, of we'll call it locking up. It wasn't until I would say SOF and the genesis of their training until much later, until simunitions came around, where you could really push the envelope and see. I knew I saw it in myself. Like the guy that went to combat in 2003 before a bunch of scenario-based training, and the guy that came back to combat in 2006, 2007 after doing hundreds of fucking runs in the house, getting shot at and shooting people with simunitions. The world was slower. It became slower. I could read things more appropriately. It just became easier to function and live. Now, everybody doesn't have the ability to go through, hundreds of iterations of scenario-based training, but even just a few it will teach you how to, one, control your adrenaline, and even putting yourself into places where you have to control your adrenaline. That was one of the things that I tried to do early before combat was I would go climbing and whitewater kayaking and put myself into scenarios where I knew I was going to have to be controlled as far as I'm going to have to work my way through an environment, solve problems, and also be scared out of my fucking mind.
You're self-stress inoculating.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you have to. So I just don't see... Well, I think there's a stigma too. And you could be... I hope you're debunking it, because I think you are debunking part of this stigma, which is one of the things I really like about what you're doing is, to be a prepper, there's kind of a negative stigma, I think, from a lot of people out there because they think crazy, like QAnon or something, right? That's where they go instantly versus making the skills fun and injecting those into your life and saying, no, you can actually thrive and be a better human and be a better, more productive participant in this beautiful country that we live in if you just know a few other skills. And it can be really fucking fun, by the way, which I love what you're doing because I think there's so many people out there that it becomes more of like the doomsday perspective as to you got to get a bunker and you got to have 3 years worth of food. And they're always thinking about these crazy scenarios versus, oh, hey, let's make this really fucking fun and cool. And oh, by the way, we also have the reality of this situation. Because I think that's what I've seen over the last few years. I watched a ton of your guys' stuff. I love the primitive skills and all the other things that you're bringing to the table. I mean, the fishing, the hunting, like all the stuff that you guys are doing up there, it's fucking awesome to see. Because, well, one, I'm into that shit. So it's like partly, my bag. But have you seen that from your business perspective? Have you seen that as you're evolving it, have you seen more people being turned on to the skills themselves and being less of a, is it less of a stigma than it used to be?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we use the Trojan horse method of, hey, recreation is a Trojan horse for all things preparedness. Because if you're a hunter and you're not thinking about survival contingencies, making a fire, shelter, even signal, those basic skill sets of land navigation. If you're an overlander and you're not thinking about the same plus first aid and all the considerations, fuel and mobility considerations. So we have all these cool little recreational aspects to make it a lifestyle. Because I don't think preparedness could ever be a hobby. Because the hobbyists will go to Walmart, they'll buy a piece of shit kit
Right.
full of crap that they've never opened. They'll throw it in their trunk and they'll say, I'm prepared.
Right.
Right. And then when the bad man-made or natural disaster happens, they realize it's a big bag of shit, and they typically learn a hard lesson. Versus the person who's like, shameless plug for Sportsman's, Cabela's, and Bass Pro. You go somewhere where there's high quality equipment and gear, and then you buy the right kit, and then you buy into the culture, you take the class, and then you realize, oh man, this is an immersive experience. The whole family can get involved in this. And I love that idea because, look, I hate fringe actors, right? I hate people who are trying to be edgy off, like they're just being extreme because typically it's a gimmick, right? But when you have people who are looking at things and they go, hey, let's apply logic and common sense, and we don't have to be extreme. Let's go out overland. Let's do a survival course. Like the scenario-based stuff. We included simunitions. One, there's two companies that are legitimate in the space for this. Simunitions and UTM. I bought a $120,000 simulator that's in my warehouse space to train civilians on stress inoculation and scenarios.
Right.
That's effective. It's proven effective. We bought 25 Sims Glock 17s. How to get the permission from Glock and Simunitions to be able to run this.
Right.
And I'm talking thanks to Tony Blauer, who is doing scenario-based training at our place this last weekend. I'm talking to UTM this week because I'm building a civilian military law enforcement shoot house complex, 8,000 square foot, to give. I'm not just concerned about tactical entities. That's a thing. But I'm concerned about single moms, families, children. What's the scenario when the door gets kicked in and you're by yourself and you have to move to a weapon and defend your life? And let's rep it. Let's see where it ends. Let's see where it gets us, and then let's build a foundation and then get you better. When you were training me in contracting, I won't go into detail about stuff because I know that some of it's sensitive. But I remember one of the scenarios, and you might remember it. You've trained hundreds of people, but thousands of people. When I went through, the easiest thing to do in special operations is be a member of a team, a collective task of close quarters battle, where you're an individual, but you're collectively managing a scenario or a problem of angles, right? Very easy to do when you're walking towards a breach point and you have one sliver of the pie. When all your teammates that you trust, because you know their families, you know their competency, you don't have to pick up any of their slivers of the pie. So you're narrowly focused. Well, when I went into contracting, because you're a singleton, a true singleton in some cases, with just you and your capability, and you strip all that away, then you feel naked and afraid, right?
Right.
And now you're like, oh, well, wow, I have to cover this 360. The first scenario I went into, I ran into the house dynamically, and things are in slow motion. I've taught this before, and I'm comfortable in the house. And a dude in a blower suit kicks in the door, and I stitch him up as per my SOP that I was operating in my military unit. And I smashed this dude. And then it gets done, and they're like, so you killed this guy and came in the room. Like, why'd you do that? I'm like, oh, well, he kicked in the door during an active shooting, and I stitched him up. Like, he didn't have a gun. I'm like, does he need to have a gun? I'm like, wait, let's do an ROE.
Right.
So, like, give me my ROE again.
Yeah.
It's like, you can't do that. I'm like, but it's an active. Okay, I get it. Oh, this is different. This is a different game I'm playing. What I realized in that scenario is, outside of the military and special operations and what we did overseas, civilians are operating in a semi-permissive environment at all times. Yes, the likelihood is less likely than a Yemen or a Pakistan. But when you're a civilian, you're a singleton. So all the tactics that you need to think about as a person, as a mama bear, they need to be honed in your ability to selectively and narrowly focus on the things that are going to give you the highest statistical probability of success, knowing that some things are going to drop. And I think I even learned from you, look, when you're in the house and you're an individual, you can't cover everything. And you see dudes who would literally paint the walls and run in circles because they're like, but wait,
spinning like a top.
They're spinning.
Yeah.
And you're like, listen, you have priorities now. and what your priorities in these solutions, we're going to give you the highest probability of success, but you're going to have to drop things. All of those translations translate in many ways to civilians' abilities to essentially live. And it doesn't have to be this scary thing, but you're right. It has to be scenario based. That's the only way you could, which is why we've actually moved to that model. Yes, there's a time and place for technical reps and building skill sets, but most often what you'll see in our courses, Decision Point, some of our courses that we're running now with simunitions, is the wheels come off rapidly,
They do.
very quick when you're put into a real life situation where you had a plan, and immediately when you got punched in the face, that plan went to shit, and now you have to adapt through the scenario. And again, adaptation is the number one characteristic of somebody who's more likely to survive. Not what school they went to, not what tactics they know, not even what competency they have in their job in special operations, but their ability to adapt in real time rapidly through a stressful situation.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think about that all the time as far as how do you teach adaptability, right? How do you teach this complex problem solving, split decision making? And I think obviously, my life up to this point is kind of given me the experience that I continue to access as far as, this is what I've seen. This is what I've seen what works. But I'm always kind of looking at that as far as teaching adaptability to the kids, or, even within my own family or the company, having people being able to just adjust their plan on the fly. I'll do things with the family, and my wife, if she's listening to this, the jig is up, I guess, where I'm just like, hey, let's just wing it. Let's go. Come on. Let's figure it out. Yeah. We'll figure it out on the fly.
Spontaneity.
Hey, it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? We're going to get a fucking hotel room. If it doesn't work out, like wherever we're going, we're going to have to pull in and get a hotel room, or the worst things is, we're going to have to sleep as a family in the truck somewhere because we just didn't get to where we were going. I can think of a lot worse things in life than, sleeping in the truck with your family because you didn't get to where you were going, right? It's not a big deal. The big deal, I think, is, or the bigger deal, I think, is not having the psychological resilience to just be able to do that on the fly as a family. So when you're working through even the scheduled circumstance of the day with your kids, like we all have our cadence in life, right? We, especially as a lot of very successful, I think, mothers or households are run on a schedule, right? It's like 7:30's breakfast, 8:30's getting ready for school, 9:45 or 8:45, you're out the door, you get back, you get lunch, everything's on a schedule. Like trash canning the schedule and just going with whatever comes at you, the way that it comes at you, and being spontaneous to what you're referring to. That's also, I think, something that you have to kind of build in to your skill sets, because if your kids don't have the psychological resilience to do that and just be able to adapt on the fly, and I see it with my kids all the time. It's like, what are we doing? Or let's jump in the truck. Let's go do this for the afternoon, and just letting them go for 3 or 4 or 5 hours on whatever the hell they're doing. That to me is a skill in its own. And I don't know how. I think what you guys are doing up there, I think it's probably one of the best, if not the best, series of skills that you can kind of build, not only internally as an individual, but also you can kind of pull the thread, and you can see a bunch of other cool people doing a lot of other things. The fact that you're here, it's fucking great. And I mean, I think that it's one of those things I continue to look at what you guys are doing. The things I look forward to, the children's book, like I'm really looking forward to that. Hopefully you'll do a book one of these days, right? And then I think outside of that, this primitive living stuff is fucking rad, man. Like I want to see, like the things I want to see really badly are you guys doing these like family experience based things that are like goat packing 101, or
they're coming. Yeah.
Are they coming?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what you were talking about too is, look, I think you have to be a master of chaos to be an unconventional Green Beret.
Right.
And that is very well trained and bred into us.
Mm-hmm.
And guys like you, I think guys like me who are creative, right? We grow up, we're into art, we're into books, we're into a lot of different things. We're into evolving creatively.
Right.
So when you take an opportunity for somebody like you to thrive in an environment where you can create your own doctrine, right? And operating in chaos, it stems from actually probably the indigenous experience and culture.
Mm-hmm.
Because Americans are comfortable with doctrine,
Right.
which means they're comfortable with routine. Scheduling, we thrive in discipline. But when you start cutting that away because of other people's culture, you have to quickly adapt in those cultures. And, you show up and the guy's an hour late and you're like, why are you an hour late? It's like, well, that's how we roll.
Right.
What do you mean you guys have a bartering system? Isn't that corruption? No, that's just called a bartering system. Oh, you guys are here and you guys got to take a break during a gunfight to pray? Okay, well, I guess we'll figure that out, right? So you become very good at operating in seemingly chaos. And what I've realized, and especially in business, is given the fact that I've lost a lot of people recently, is they're uncomfortable with chaos. Mm-hmm. They can't function without routine. And what I've realized that routine gives you is it gives you a benefit of optimizing your time in a way. Most people, they're not optimizing their time because they're inefficient, but it gives you a feeling of that. So then when you have to adapt, it feels like you're exposed. And then that exposure feels uncomfortable. And then people can't adapt to that change. What we're talking about as well is exposure. Like we run a resilience course. We just had a course called Breakout. That's like mini Robin Sage.
That's what I wanted to ask you about. Was like,
oh
what is that? Because I only saw.
Don't ever sign up for it.
Okay.
Sign up for resilience, which is the higher end version, the gentleman's course. But Breakout is an exposure experience.
Right.
Because the concept in exposure is if you want to become more resilient, you have to be exposed to things that you're not comfortable with.
Yeah.
For many people, it's just going camping and not being able to wash your ass,
right,
or brush your teeth or sleep in your cozy bed. That alone creates this experience where you leave that and you go, I either am addicted to that now and I want more of that, and you seek it, or you're like, I'll never do that for the rest of my life. And then you go back into your hidey hole of complacency.
Mm-hmm.
So Breakout is like a mini Robin Sage. Look, Kevin Owens ran a wonderful course, and the team ran a wonderful course. But we did things like we took them to the Petzl headquarters down here in Salt Lake City, and they did roping. They had to overcome their fear in heights because it's a massive tower,
right,
where they had to rappel off these massive heights, even the rooftop. And then I hired Sean Kirkwood, who's in our circle, who used to run as the NCOIC, the non-commissioned officer in charge of the RTL, of the Camp Slappy in Sear School.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm just going to say he ran a little lab.
Okay.
And those guys, walking away from that experience, I talked to one of my buddies, Greg, who was in the course last night at dinner. And he said, dude, it's the most impactful course I've ever experienced.
Really?
And the camaraderie in 5 days,
right,
suffering in silence, with nobody to virtue signal to, nobody to post and text and hashtag to,
right,
built a bond between them like we've seen built in combat and in war and in training. And so, outside of preparedness technical skill sets, there's a whole thing that has to do with exposure that builds resilience and mindset, which makes you better prepared. I mean, if guys and gals aren't looking at their physical preparedness, their mindset, their resilience, their self-awareness, their situational awareness as a start point before they buy the sexy gun, that's $3,000 and serrated. Like, come on.
That's a huge issue, Mike. Like I see that all the time. Where it's like, how do you break people out of this idea that your pistol, the better gear that you have is not going to substitute for the fucking skill? It's like you're a way more dangerous person with a fucking high point than the average person with, an STI with a fucking RMR and a flashlight on it, right? You're in the category of a fraction of a percent with Actually, I would say a muzzleloader.
I have a 6-shot 38 special revolver
Right.
in my fanny pack that I brought.
But that's the point is, how do you guys emphasize this? It is mindset. It is skill. It's about building your knowledge base. It's not about your kit. I mean, your kit's part of it. It has to enhance your skill set. Absolutely. But it can never replace your fucking skill. And that's the thing that I wrestle with all the time, where I see people and I talk to, obviously a ton of people here at Black Rifle and the community of people. It's like, what kind of pistol do I want to buy? I'm like, more importantly, the question you should be asking yourself is, where am I going to take my training course? Who am I going to in order to seek knowledge? Because there's a lot of apostles out there, what I'll call is like tactical fucking apostles that know fuck all about what they're talking about. Just so everybody's clear, like they know nothing.
Yeah.
And there's a small handful of people that you can really rely on out there in the ether web. They have a lot of institutional knowledge. Do you guys, and my question is, when you guys field those questions, because I'm sure you get that question probably 100 times a day, what pistol should I buy, right? Do you guys have a definitive answer? Or are you guys saying, well, what kind of training do you have? What kind of background do you have? What's your background first? Or what's your lifestyle? Are you kind of fielding those questions first before you go into that?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. If somebody asked me that, in fact, we just did a YouTube video on it with Amber, where we did this mock scenario.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, if you're in this area or even not in this area, my store in Heber City is not a gun store. The reason I deliberately didn't, I have my FFL SOT. The reason I did not do that is because Neil and Casey at Ready Gunner, that's the best gun store you're going to get, right? Cup of coffee, get the best gun for concealed carry, and get the classes to bear. That's where I recommend everybody go. So we did a mock scenario where Amber walked in and she asked the question. She said, hey, interested in getting a pistol. And always the right answer is, outside of most gun stores who are trying to pitch to sell, is tell me the distinct reason why you want that handgun. And people always pimp me and they're like, well, Mike, you said this gun was the right gun. I'm like, listen, I have 100 guns and each one of those guns serves a distinct purpose. Even guns that don't, like my Luger, that I'll never use, but it's a historical memorabilia. But each gun that I have has a different facet, and there's not one be all solution. Now, if you have a budget and there's constraints, yes, I can point you in the right direction. The first question is, why do you need to use a gun?
Right.
What is the gun's purpose? Is it home defense versus everyday carry self-defense? Is it for sports shooting? Is it for recreational shooting with your kid in the backyard? All different guns and all different answers. The second thing I do is I always get the person's size of their hand. And typically if it's in person, then it's comparatively to mine, which I have pretty large hands. It's this big hands.
It's like a big thing of bananas.
It's just like huge bananas, like weird shaped bananas.
Weird bananas.
Yeah. I got this weird spread too between the camera. Can see that. It's like between, do you have that? Guys who are creative, actually, there's a genetic, it's like the feet thing.
Is it really?
Oh yeah. It's a whole thing. It's a line of DNA. So I do that because the reason I want to know your hand size is because my recommendation for you in pistol has to do with your hand size.
Yeah.
A lot of guys default will be subcompact. They'll say, you need to get a subcompact because that carries better. Well, I know because I used to do the job. I carried a Glock 17. And guess what? For my hand size, that's a perfect gun size for me to carry all over the world. Now, you take that and scale it down to 19, not shaving that much off, but again, smaller, compact. Glock 43 is an extreme because there's a big difference between a 43 and its subcompact size and a Glock 17 and its full size. So I recommend mostly single action only pistols because I want the ability to pull the trigger around in the chamber and make it go boom. Simplifying, again, the conditioning that you would need when you pull your gun in stress and in a fight or flight potential scenario where you're sympathetic and you're trying to survive versus like the technical things that the 1911 guys will tell you, like, this is the only way. I kind of know some of the reasons why the Colt Commander or a full-size 45 ACP were the solutions. Because back then, at 900 feet per second, and with whatever you're using compared to 45 ACP, the foot-pounds of energy were there. Now, with this synthetic bonded ammo,
Right.
at whatever the manufacturer is in self-defense, is a comparable, if not superior, a superior external ballistic round, terminal ballistic round. So when we're looking at terminal ballistics, now we're kind of meeting this threshold. I want simple action pistols that I go click, it goes boom, and then it's durable and reliable.
Yep.
Typically for me, that's Glock.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of SIG too. I like the guys that work at SIG, whether it's the Lindsays or the Kyles, Lambs of the world, Dan Horner as well. That gives me full confidence that if I buy a SIG, I have a 320X carry out of the box or a 365, it's going to be the right pistol for the carry. But again, my nightstand gun, SIG P220, full-size 45 ACP with a Deo Presso Lee Bear crest on top of it, because I was given it to me by my team in 05
Right.
As a going away present, but also for self-defense, the perfect pistol. Has a light on it. Completely different than one I'm carrying in my waistband, which happens to be in my fanny pack sitting right there. And it's a 6-shot revolver.
Right.
Synthetic bonded ammo. Why? Because it's got a long trigger pull. I don't have to have it in a holster, and it's in my fanny pack. And I could work that wheel gun like it was my job, because it is.
Well, it's funny because you put out the differences in the lifestyle in which you're choosing that, we'll call it pistol or whatever it is. So are you choosing an everyday carry? Are you choosing it for home defense? Are you choosing it for recreation? And what type of recreation? I get this question a lot. So I have the same type of answer, which is I'm a Glock 43 everyday carry guy. That's what I carry every day. So it's in my fanny pack with, one of those Terran Tactical extensions. Sorry to everybody but that's what I use. Yeah, it's because it's aluminum. I like it. It's, it is what it is, right? But
That's
I
the
gotta
base
have,
plate piece, right?
Yeah, it's just a base plate, it's a 2-round extender.
Yeah.
It's a +2, but I got to have a light, right? So I like having a light on everything, and it has a laser because my wife is not as proficient as I am. So in case that my wife needs to utilize that pistol, it also has a zeroed laser on it. So if she pulls it out and has to use it, she can use the laser. It's fine. Like, she's used to that. And honestly, when you can cross train, that's what I use. What's on my nightstand is an STI, right? So I have a little bit, I've got a big window on it. So it's got the Leupold
Is it an open gun?
Point.
You have an open gun with a pro timer?
Yeah.
Hold on a second.
It's got a comp on it, a 20-round mag.
Ricazza running around
it's got,
the house.
what is that, an X300 Surefire that'll light up the fucking sky, So it's like, yeah, but I've got more Illum. I've got a Delta point on it, 20 rounds, right? So it's the same thing. It's at home. I've got 20 rounds, bigger light, a Delta point on it. Every day, it's smaller pistol size. I can slide it into my waistband. It's got one of those little clips on the side. What I prefer, I'm like you. What I prefer is like, I don't want to be burdened with a full-size Glock every day. I fucking don't. I don't want to carry a full-size Glock every day. And also, the majority of the scenarios I'm going to find myself in, statistically, I will be able to deal with whatever problem set domestically is presented to me with a Glock 43. Like, I fully believe, like, I've had to pull my pistol 3 times here in the States, here on my facility, with typically people that have either broken in, they've found themselves here, on the weekends in the back, but it's always been here. It's always been on, here in Salt Lake. We've got there's a bit of a homeless problem and a bit of a breaking and entering at times. We don't have we don't live in the greatest area for Black Rifle Coffee.
It's a fire base.
It's a fire base, right? Yeah. So 3 times, but what I've told people is the number one deterrent that you can use is not shooting someone. It's actually carrying it, because just having the ability to ensure that people understand that you're deadly serious about utilization of a weapon to get yourself out of a situation will deter them from any advancement most of the time. It really does. It's a deterrent. So
it mitigates risk.
It mitigates risk.
Yeah.
Just carrying it mitigates it. Because one, I'm going to try not to be I'm not going to try to be a statistic. So obviously, I've been exposed to the reality of life. So I understand bad things can happen. And I also find myself here in this building at all times of night. I'm here at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm the person that responds if the security alarm goes off. I live, 15 minutes away. So it's easy for me to show up. So for me, it's a real situation for me to be able to say, listen, you might have to pull, depending on your pattern of life and what you do, you might have to pull a weapon on somebody. But most of the time, it's not going to end in a shooting. Like statistically, even I think I read, and I don't think the FBI actually tracks these data points, but I think the number of shootings referencing actually how many times legal gun owners have actually had to show their weapon, it deters something like 90+% of any violent exchanges between a criminal and somebody that's carrying a gun. It deters way more criminal offenses than the shootings themselves. So it's like something like 10x, right? It's fucking crazy to think that just by carrying something, one, you can be more confident that you can deal with the situation, and two, it will deter violence from happening. You won't statistically have to use it. When I say you won't have to use it, I'm putting myself into a category of data points that are saying 99% of the people that carry firearms specifically every day don't have to use them. That's what I'm referring to. I'm not saying you'll never have to do it. Please don't put me on that. I'm saying it's a deterrent. And if you talk to and you talk to a ton of police, legal gun owners that have, their concealed carry permits, I think they are the most law-abiding portion of the American citizenry that we have. Like statistically, it's like overwhelmingly, these people don't commit crimes. They don't even fucking speed. So for me, I'm like, why would we not want more legal gun owners out there that are carrying concealed and then taking part in advanced training? To me, it just doesn't hold water in the entire gun conversation, especially because now we're going into this conversation of gun legislation, gun confiscation, all these things. I'm like, I don't understand it.
Yeah.
I really don't understand how you can target a specific demographic of people that are overwhelmingly proven to be law-abiding citizens and then say, we're going to criminalize your behavior, which is complete insanity to me. I wanted to actually get your perspective on that, which is, do you think, one, are you following gun legislation stuff? Are you following it pretty closely? Yeah. Two, do you think that they're going to pass some big gun legislation pieces in the next few months? And if so, what do you think they're going to be?
So I am involved. In fact, our sheriff in Wasatch County has proposed an ordinance allowing people to carry concealed, and then making it a sanctuary county. There's a difference between like the signaling of that via a statement and then the creating of an ordinance or law to protect your citizens as they're rolled up by, the police department or by a sheriff who has to, follow the letter of the law.
Right.
So on May 12th, actually, there's a vote that's happening, which might be around the time this is dropped.
Right.
But that happens in Heber City, and there's 3 council members who currently are opposed to it in some form or fashion. I'm trying to find out more details because I'm going to try to motivate them to do it, because if not, I'm going to go full bore on making sure they don't get reelected as members of the city council, because they're affecting people's lives. And you're absolutely right. This idea of criminalizing law-abiding citizens, where we're talking about using examples of shootings, of criminal activity where people have obviously broken the law as the example of how to create more laws against law-abiding citizens, where we know criminals are only going to be empowered by those laws being created, because now they know that the demographic or the population has less capability because they're law-abiding. So if they put out a law, the overwhelming majority of people will say, I'm going to follow the law, and there'll only be victims. They'll be exploited. For me, not advocating for the breaking of laws, but I'll run that line because I'm not, for example, going to walk into an institution that has alcohol as a determining factor if I'm going to carry, because the likelihood of there being somebody who goes high and right, who is on the fringe because he's intoxicated, that's going to endanger my family who's trying to have a good meal is higher.
Right. So
again, a law that's created to only hurt law-abiding citizens. And so the overwhelming majority of these laws, by the way, are never enforced unless compounding charges on bad people in the first place.
Right.
So people always ask me, well, Mike, should I carry because where I'm at, I can't carry? Are you a law-abiding citizen? Yes. So then what do you have to worry about in being searched and seized because you're a law-abiding? You can think of a scenario like, I don't know, maybe a traffic stop. Well, you're running that risk. I'm willing to accept that risk. So the thing I think is going to happen is, one, they already came out weak. The Biden, and as he came out, said, we're going to go after a couple of things. He came after the ghost gun, came after the pistol brace, and the investigation even aspect of potentially the red flag laws. Dude, that's mind-boggling, right? I mean, I would be gunless and I would be breaking the law because I've been diagnosed with PTSD because I've been to war 9 times.
Right.
In fact, I had no choice in that.
Right.
Hey, psychologist, I've been to war 9 times. Okay, we're going to go ahead and chalk you up for PTSD, TBI as well. Roger that, I guess. And if you come after my guns, I'm not declaring war on anybody.
Right.
I'm just telling you, look, I'm a law-abiding citizen. I mind my own business, and I want government to stay their asses out of my business. And when it comes to gun control, I don't think there should be any control of guns. If you're a law-abiding citizen, law-abiding citizens don't break laws,
right?
Because they're law-abiding. So if you're looking at sovereignty, it's those people who are doing right always that we need to focus on protecting and insulating. And then criminals who are intent because they are doing it, they need to be penalized more. They need to be put in prison longer, or whatever it is, focus on them.
Right.
Take the attention off of us. And somebody asked me before, and like, do you believe in any form of gun control? No. If Billy Bob next door wants to own a tank, if Sean Whalen wants to buy a tank, which he's trying to buy a tank,
I'm sure he would.
Buy a tank.
Yeah.
Because if you have the right range, if you're following the protocol, guess what? Big Gov is getting that tax. You have to go through procedures for permits and everything else. Follow that and shoot your tank safely. Because the unspoken truth of all this is a government who understands its population is armed and willing to protect itself against oppression and tyranny is not going to fuck with it. So more the merrier. You want a javelin and you got a javelin range you go to, and then that starts a business and a whole commerce for javelin family picnics. Go fucking shoot javelins, right? Do what you got to do, because I know what happens in foreign countries that me and you have been to. That balance of power is created just by the formalities, or you call it informalities, of understanding that these people are armed and we're not going to fuck with them. We're just going to continue to go after bad guys, which we should focus our attention on. And somehow this attention that's focused on, especially you guys, white people, like white guys, like all of a sudden you're the enemy. I don't get it. I don't understand that.
Well, I'm a Jew, so just so everybody knows, I fall into a white guy category, but I think it's crazy to me, because right now we're entering in this conversation. I've obviously listened to it, and it's so interesting to me that people always want to take something from other people. Like they want to take something. So I look and listen to these conversations. So it's irrelevant to the political side, right? And I think people are really interested in forfeiting their liberties because they don't utilize them, right? So if you're not a gun owner, of course you're like, fuck it, I don't care. Like, do whatever you want to the gun owners. And then you have a very galvanized portion of that, we'll call it non-gun owners, that are like, you get the passive section, and then you have the active non-gun owner that are anti-gun. And they're actively participating in trying to take the guns from the gun owners, right? They want to take something from someone else because of some perceived non-data driven threat that they believe in, right? It's like the double maskers outside, right? So you got people that are wearing their fucking 2 masks as they're running on the trails in Wasatch. There's zero data that says that you can get COVID outside, even from other people, especially when you're keeping social distance and all these other things. But you've got a section of our population that, given the opportunity, they would love to force everybody in America to wear 2 masks and a fucking face shield 24 hours a day.
Forever.
And they would, forever. That's the way they would live their lives. And so out of fear, you have we'll call it a more militant section of each one of these populations. And it's also on the religious perspective of our country. So this is where things get dicey. And this is where conservatives start to really piss me off, because they're in bed with the Christian right. And the Christian right is just as active in wanting to participate in taking rights away from other sections of our population. And that's when I say, you guys really need to get your shit together. Smaller government means smaller government. It means less interference. It means the government can't tell you who you're going to marry. You can just marry whoever the fuck you want to marry. That's the way it should work. And when we get into this tit for tat, and that's what happens, is I think you have one section, especially on the conservative side, they've been in this an active participant in the conversation of taking other people's rights. They say, this is a Judeo-Christian country and you shouldn't be able to marry, men shouldn't be able to marry men, or whatever the fuck it is that they want to come up with, because Jesus said that you shouldn't marry other men, whatever the fuck it is. Okay. Well, when you tell the government to enforce that on other people, those other people will then return the favor and say, yeah, well, we think that you shouldn't be able to carry your guns. So when I look at this, I say, why do you guys give so much? Why do you care so much about what other people are doing? And I think one of the big problems that we have is this left, right, tit for tat. This is a game. I'm trying to win and I want to take something from somebody else. So I'm going to use the federal system in order to enforce what I believe is the ethical standard because of my religious background or because of my political affiliation. Because honestly, I think, wokeness is one of those things that's turned into more of a cult affiliation. It's not founded in reality. It's something that you could almost say is a religion at this point.
Or disorder.
Or a disorder, right? And that's why I'm trying to turn this entire conversation into, look, the national conversation is left or right. Let's just be less concerned with what the fuck our neighbors are doing unless it's really impeding on your safety. Then you should be like, yeah, okay, you can't put your javelin range, in your backyard when you live on a 1/4 acre in the middle of the city. Why? Because it's really fucking dangerous and you might kill my kids, right? But outside of that, from my perspective, and maybe I'm wrong. I'm probably, like I said, I'm often wrong, never in doubt. But I think the gun rights conversation, and part of this is it's predicated on conservatives have wanted to take things from other people. They really have. And I think that's where we don't have at times an ethical leg to stand on, because people are saying, well, you guys are, enforcing or trying to enforce different laws that ultimately affect whether or not we would say traditionally liberal aspects. So marijuana is another good one, right? Conservative states have loved to outlaw marijuana across the United States for recreation or medicinal use. And then liberal cities and states have been able to legalize it because they've wanted to, we'll call it, pull back their liberty. And I think that's great. Liberal cities have said, we want to marry who we want to marry, right? And conservatives have kept them from marrying who they want to marry. They've kept them from their pot and they've kept them from marrying who they want to marry. Well, there's the animus that I think is created along those lines where people have continued to try to enforce their ethics on other sections of the population. I think, if anything, I try to do is just tell people, like, can you just not try to enforce what you believe is appropriate on other people, and just live and let live. So it's like, you want to marry who you want to marry. You want to smoke some pot. Fuck. For the most part, I don't care, even if you want to do what it is that you're doing outside of a few things I can think of, like right off the top of my head. Like, you can't exploit children. Like, that's obvious. But there's very few things I think that you should be restricted from doing as an individual, as long as it doesn't affect somebody else. But how do you get, because I know you think very similar to me. Do you get the, do you get a lot of, we'll call it the religious, more religious right in the preparedness crowd? Do you see a lot of more of the religious right over there?
I don't know if I call it religious. I probably call it just the right fringe.
Right fringe?
Yeah, right wing extremist. Okay. I mean, I just recently, I think I had a message last night from a guy who was ripping me a new one.
Right.
Actually took the time to Facebook message me, which my account's hard to find. But Facebook messaged me and called me a coward and all this stuff for starting American Contingency and not getting out there and going to all 50 states during COVID and spreading the word of AMCON, which is for me a movement to just get off your ass. And it's on you, by the way. It's not on me.
Right.
I'm not coming in a little bird to save your ass. It's motivating and educating you to make moves on your own. Stand up in your own community. Say, hey, we're gonna take care of our own people. Neighbors being neighbors again. And I think what you're talking about has to do with a lot of amplifying through social media all these cultural issues that people, it lies dormant in people. Mm-hmm. It's like a virus. And then if you look at the social aspects and the way that virus takes and evolves into what it becomes, it has a mechanism to do that because of the platforms that we have in social media. So they think about something. So you might think, oh, well, there's this thing called anti-racism where you can't be not racist because that's anti-racist. So you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Right? Everybody's racist. Mm-hmm. It's inherent. So then you have people who are woke using their platforms to communicate about it. And I see it all as white noise. And no pun intended. It's just a lot of noise. In the 60s, the start point, and this could be debated, but one of the start points historically of the entire gun control movement starting happened when Black Panthers decided to go into Sacramento and petition and protest their civil rights with guns. Shotguns, rifles. They did that. Yep. And guess who the governor was? Ronald Reagan. Mm-hmm. And Ronald Reagan put it all out. We're going to start creating laws and organizing. And then that translated into Texas doing the same. And the next thing you know, all these gun laws started coming out. And then we're like, wait a minute, what are we doing here? Because now we're taking and suppressing our own guns. But you said something exactly right. It's tit for tat. So now it's just war, right? Mm-hmm. Here's what I realized. You can't compete with any of that shit. Right. The loser who texted me last night, who took the time, who's a right-wing extremist in the way that he vocalized, I don't know if he is, but the way he came across, I perceive that. You're going to have leftists, you're going to have right-wing extremists, you're going to have a whole bunch of fringe losers who don't understand the gravity of reality because they don't fucking live in it. They live in this fucking cell phone. Right. So go live your life outside of this. And that guy who messaged me, I felt bad for him. I felt sorry for him. I went, you know what? That dude needs to be bitch slapped in a breakout course ran by Fieldcraft because that might wake him not to the woke culture, but to the reality that he's living a tangible life that he's missing out on because he's so tethered to this fucking device. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fucking crush business, make a lot of fucking money, build empires, build media projects that bring conservative values from my perspective, from your perspective, back into the households. I'm going to buy a whole bunch of fucking land and I'm going to fuck off with my family and homestead while all these bitches are talking about this. Because I don't give a fuck. I know where I belong in this world and it's with my family. I don't care about woke culture. I don't care about this amplification of virtue signaling through whatever the LeBron James of the world could eat a dick. I hate him. Fuck, who gives a fuck? You throw a ball into a net because of the liberties that were fought and sacrificed for in blood, sweat, and tears by Americans who are willing to stand up, including African Americans who are willing to stand up and fight for the country. That's why you could tweet as you shoot the fucking ball and live your $1 million lifestyle, driving your fucking Lambo, talking shit about everything good in this fucking world. Is because of all those sacrifices. And I know there are many Americans who listen to this who get that. Yeah, I'm going to fucking be drinking Black Rifle coffee. I'm going to be fucking teaching people about preparedness. And I'm going to be homesteading with my fucking family where I belong. Nowhere else do I belong. Not on a stage, not on a platform, not in a fucking political scene. Fuck that, man. It aggravates me. But now it refines more mission-driven purpose. And I know exactly. I could see it. It's clairvoyant.
Mm-hmm.
Me and you, it know exactly our past because of all the things that are happening. And when you go through that and you experience those trials and tribulations, kind of come in full spectrum and full circle, living a life of war, and then taking advantage of the convenience of freedom, we have a better understanding of the gravity of our lives and have no time to piss it away with fucking losers. I want to be fire striking magnesium with my fucking kids. Worried about my future, which is tangible and it smells and it feels and it loves. Fuck all that. Fuck this, you know?
Oh man, Mike, that's great. Free range American, buddy. I appreciate it. That's a great place for us to end. What else you got? You got anything else?
Well, I just want to mention.
You got some rundowns.
I've never done notes before, but TBI is taking over my life. So
hey.
Coffee helps, by the way.
Yeah, it does.
Proven to help. You know, I've read a case study about caffeine and how it helps stimulate. Really? Yeah, I'll send it to you. Yeah. On stimulating the mind. But a lot of the issues, like, I don't know if you know this, they try to prescribe it to me. Adderall, I will never take Adderall because I deployed with it and saw it distribute was lies. Provigil, caffeine, all things that are being used to help people with TBI because of all the cognitive fucking errors and glitches in our brains. I wanted to mention Kyle Lamb's foundation.
I love that guy.
Great fucking American.
Great American.
Who called me and was like, good on you for focusing on the positive. A lot of getting affirmation from a Kyle Lamb in the world saying, dude, all this shit that's going on, focus on the positive. He started the Stay in the Fight Foundation to help people, not just first responders, not military, but people, stemming from an experience that he had that was private in his family, where he had to come out of pocket, and he's just helping people. That's on VikingTactics.com.
Yep.
Where you can go to the Stay in the Fight Foundation tab and hit that up. If we can maybe get that in the notes, I don't know.
Fuck yeah, we can get there.
And then lastly, I wanted to ask you a question because Amber had asked this question, and she said the favorite whole bean for French press coffee. What's your favorite whole bean for French press?
I don't drink a lot of French press. I don't like it.
What the fuck is French press?
It's just that big glass jar that you plunge the thing down.
Okay. I use that downrange.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
I used to use it quite a bit. It creates a really dirty cup of coffee because the grounds sit in the bottom of it. And
with all the grit.
Yeah. And I don't use a lot of French press, but the best French press coffee that I have, if you're using proper to water to coffee ratios, which the French press is typically going to be 12-1. 1 meaning the coffee, 12 meaning the water on your weight or your scale. You're going to do really coarse coffee because if you do it fine, it's going to create a kind of a sludge and it's going to ultimately just be a really, really too strong of a cup. So 12-1 ratio, really coarse. And I use Just Black is what I like to use. I use Just Black for just about everything. So pour over in the Chemex, French press. I use AK-47 obviously in the espresso. And then I drink the coffees from the exclusive coffee subscription pretty much every morning. So those are the smaller runs. But yeah, that's
smaller, more intimate runs.
Mm-hmm.
So
wait. Micro lots.
So the micro lots for, you're calling it the Premier?
Exclusive coffee.
Exclusive.
Club. Yeah.
So it's limited. I'm assuming it's limited. And
yeah, I only do like a couple 1,000 pounds of that a month.
I need to get on that train, man.
I know.
Sign me up. I'll sign me up today.
Okay, done.
We'll do it.
Yeah.
That coffee that you made before this, that's probably going to give me anal leakage in a good way.
Perfect, yeah.
If there's such a thing.
Dude, this is amazing, by the way.
You like that?
Yeah, this is amazing. This is one of the coolest things I've ever received, if not the coolest. This is awesome. I think, this is super cool. This is one of the coolest things I think anybody's ever given me. Mike Glover, it's always great. Thanks, man.
Thanks for having me,
buddy.
Love you, man.